Welcome back to Real Florida Magazine.
Welcome back. Today again on the beautiful campuses of Florida Panhandle Technical College. Our guest today, Joe Taylor. Joe is the Superintendent of Schools for Washington County, Florida. Here today to talk about the brand new Kate Smith Elementary School. If you're a regular viewer of the show, you've seen Joe and myself at the school site following the progress. It looks like a building now. It's not going to be long. Looking at the fall of 2016 for the first inaugural class at the new Kate Smith Elementary School. We're going to talk to Joe about all these things and more when we come back, and we will be right back. When we talk about economic development globally in any county, it's real easy to pick and say things are not being done or things are being done improperly or whatever, and we try to stay out of that fray. But one key component to economic development and in attracting businesses into any county is a good educational system. I think it'd be fair to say that having a brand new elementary school is sort of that first stepping stone into being able to attract a business who in turn will bring in their people and their people who need educational facilities for their children. Would that be fair?
I would think so, yes. And it also affords us to move years ahead technology-wise from where we're at. And that's, if you want a good education system, first off, it does cost money and it can be expensive. But what you're providing for them isn't the things, Paul, I was provided when I was in school, because this stuff didn't exist. You know, what we're looking at now is you've got to prepare them to go forward from where we are at today.
And much of that is state mandated when they talk about one device per child or online testing, and all of a sudden you have to figure out how to afford broadband and enough throughput of data to be able to do these things. Not long ago, you and I sat here in the studio and talked about the proposed half-cent sales tax as a way of funding some of that. It was defeated in the election. Will there be some costs associated with this new facility? Will we have to still look for additional funding ultimately because of some of the state mandated stuff? The
needs that drove the half-cent sales tax are still there. The bottom line of any discussion that is there, they're still there, which is what is your cost of technology? What is the cost of the things that you want to provide? And those needs will always be there. The state has blessed us in the last year, and we're so driven by what comes out of Tallahassee. You know, our funds, the majority of our funds come from Tallahassee. And their requirements that they put on us as a school district, what they want to see, you know, they are the ones driving that. And over the last year and a half, we've received about $1 million of technology funds, us and other districts in the state. That really, it was through some plans of theirs, DOE, that led to that. So we've been able, for the current time, to at least stay ahead of the curve on what's going on.
What has been one of your bigger challenges as superintendent of schools?
Of course, Kate Smith. I mean, that is a major project, and it's not something you get a one-time shot with that. You know, it has to be managed properly. It has to be run. You have to make certain I's are dotted, T's are crossed. The issues of this testing and teachers evaluation is something, and what drives that is not a local decision. You know, we are doing what Tallahassee says. DOE says we want this. We want the testing. The debacle that happened in the spring with the testing statewide, the Superintendent's Association has taken a position, and yes, I've signed on to that petition about what needs to happen with those test scores and how we do things. So that, you know, trying to work with that, the uncertainty of when you think you have a plan in place and then Tallahassee either reboots or goes totally in a different direction. You know, if you try to respond quickly to them, they may pull the plug halfway in. And over the years, I have seen that happen. The teacher evaluation piece now, that what they've done and what they expect is something we try to work. We want to do it. There's a very real need for it. There's no doubt about that. But then at the end of the day, if Tallahassee, we're going to do something different, this is it, then it throws us off. That's a difficult balancing to try to go forward with.
In the past, Joe, I've had numbers like 30%, not sure of the veracity of that number, but that are roughly a third of the people in Washington County paying property taxes, which means that they are being assessed for school taxes in millage. I don't know about the accuracy of that number, but how is that affecting us? In any large rural county, you have a lot of renters, you have a lot of people that are taking advantage of homestead exemption. Certainly we are one of those poorer rural counties. What challenges do you face because of that, and what are we doing, if anything, to try to make the best of our situation?
Washington County also, this is the first year in 8 years that the property tax base has not declined. So we had a slight uptick. It wasn't big, but at least it was an uptick, and maybe that's, a sign of things to come. I certainly hope so. Schools are funded in such a way that Tallahassee will tell you we're going to fund $6,000 a year per student. And depending on what your local tax base is, you'll contribute part and will contribute part. Our tax base and where Washington County sits, we do probably 20% of our funding comes from local tax dollars. The other 80% comes from Tallahassee. So, but if our property tax base was to skyrocket, Tallahassee would just take away what they give us. So it's a zero-sum game when you come to talk about that. Now, where a difference is made is that 1.5 local capital improvement millage that is assessed. We assess that right now, and that's what we've committed to the Kate Smith project. So if our skyrocket, if the tax base was to skyrocket, we would benefit from that. Do not get me wrong. Any increase in tax base will help us so that we have there. When we look at those dollars, one of the main things that we try to do with those from the local capital, and that's what it's supposed to be, is for your capital projects. You don't want to get into recurring expenses where you may not be able to pay for them with those tax dollars there. So we are very frugal. We go through bid processes. Anytime we use those dollars, it goes through a separate analysis and how we do that to make certain we are getting the most bang for our buck.
You don't want to build something and then find out that you can't afford to mow the grass afterward.
That's correct.
So if the state is supplying 80% roughly of our educational funding, then that means that they have got a much larger voice in what we do or the tenets to which we must hold as dictated by them than somebody who's paying 80% themselves and only taking 20% state money. Would that be accurate?
Walton County would be the poster child of that. In Walton County, here, our top property tax millage this year is right around $900,000, give or take, for 1 mil. That's what we would get for 1 mil. 1 mil in Walton County gives you $15 million. Okay. So what happens is when the state of Florida assesses with them and they do their formula, they are probably providing as much as 90% locally. The Keys, Monroe County leads the charge. They do about 95% of their stuff locally. And yes, it does change your relationship with Tallahassee, and what DOE can tell you is because if you're not dependent on them, you may go, and it's the same with construction projects, the same thing. If you're using your own money, you can do things differently.
Yeah, and again, Monroe County, Walton County, driven by the south part of that county, tourism-based income in large part. I would imagine Bay County enjoys some of that same kind of opportunity because of the Panama City Beaches area. What has been the best part for you as superintendent of schools in Washington County?
Dealing with students, dealing with the people. That is the whole bottom line of the whole situation.
During the election, during that process, you took a little bit of heat here and there because you had not been a teacher. I maintain that your position is an administrator. It's a bean counter, for lack of a better term. What I say, for somebody who is fiscally responsible, you yourself are an accountant, you've got the abilities, you've got a long work history of doing that same kind of work. To me, that's the important part of your position. Not to say that being a teacher wouldn't be of value somewhere along the line, but you don't teach, you administer, and you are the steward as well as leading the charge for funding and helping to direct the path of that educational thrust in Washington County. Not trying to blow smoke at you, but personally I think you've done a great job. I don't hear anything but good out there on the streets, for what it's worth. You bring to the table some sanity, some very objectivity, and I'll end it here and not try to flatter you anymore. But thank you for all that you do. You've made a huge difference. Obviously, in my world, I take credit for Kate Smith. You say it's taken 20 years. It's not a bad thing for it to happen under your watch. But thank you for all that you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
At the end of the day, we are a large but small population rural county with all the commensurate challenges that come with that. I mentioned a few minutes ago about the economic development. We're constantly trying to attract business here. There has to be a fertile business friendly environment for business to be attracted. Some people argue that there has to be attractions and entertainment and recreation for potential employees to want to be here in this county. Some argue that the educational system must be strong to attract those businesses. Some say the transportation system. It looks like one at a time we're sort of ticking off those boxes. And I, for one, am an eternal optimist. But in this case, having moved from Panama City Beach and Bay County after 35 years and being here in Washington County now for going on 12, I see really good things in store for Washington County. You're a Vernon guy originally, Washington County resident. What's your long-term take? What do you see Washington County do going into the immediate and long-term future?
A lot of the economic development talk that's coming on now has to do between the airport and, of course, with the interstate. And you have some very good corridors on Highway 79 as to what can happen. You know, the 4 lanes are incredibly beneficial to move packages and people to do the things that businesses want. Not sometimes so much people friendly, you know, because then it does allow you to move people quickly. But I think as far as commerce, business, the clusters that you're talking about near the interstate is what's going to drive the factors. Ebro, I think, is finally beginning to shed because of it has been locked in so long between Moody's pasture, between the restraints of the state forest, between St. Joe. St. Joe has sold quite a bit of its property, and some of that included that. So when they look, and I do know the owners of the property, they sold them about 300,000 acres. The company that owns that, there's been an article within the last week that they're going forward with a 75-year plan for the property that is owned in South Florida that they own, like that region near Disney. So as soon as they finish that process and you see the complexity of the process that they're doing with Moody's pasture going forward, I think that in the future the whole world will be changing. It may be 5 years, it may be 10 years, but it's there on the horizon.
When you say 50 or 75-year plan, that's music to my ears. Sometimes I feel that we don't have more than a 75-day plan at the way that we operate at times, and we don't have a franchise on that. We see it everywhere. So to plan long-term, to live for today, but to prepare for tomorrow, certainly a recipe for success. Short-term, we've got a new Kate Smith Elementary School. We've got a great high school facility. We've got a great middle school facility. What's the next needs? Even Vernon now, new high school, they're in pretty decent condition. What is the next thing we need educationally in capital improvements in Washington County?
Probably we're going to turn some attention to the technical college here. There's some upgrades. Its actual was built in the 60s, late 60s, and so once again the magic term American with Disabilities Act, those requirements that are there, and I support them fully, and I understand the need for them. So when we look here, probably what we're going to do is look internally at the programs. Education used to be as a very static, we're going to do the same thing. K-12 education is. The technical college is not. They have to be able to respond quickly. They have to be for the needs of the workforce that are out there. Now, if we begin to see the growth that we all hope to see, a lot of these construction needs will come back, which is, used to be that was the old technical center's forte. That was what they were training for. Now we're doing more technology. Now we're doing more of the things that's associated with that. But as far as capital, now that's my answer with things remaining static. Should some of these developments take quicker, we will start having to look at where would we put another school at? How do we handle those things? When you look at these 50 and 75-year plans, education, school location, hospitals, all of those, they're a real driving factor in those.